Fiancé's family mocked my mom who saved their business, then tried to paint me as villain. So I ruined their rehearsal dinner with one sentence. I'm 33 years old, and until recently, I was engaged to Fidelia, a woman with whom I had planned to spend the rest of my life. I met her around 6 years ago at a BBQ with mutual friends. She had a wonderful smile, was quick with a joke, and we immediately clicked. I didn't hesitate when I chose to propose a year ago. It felt like the proper time and person. At the moment, I was not only marrying Fidelia, but also her family. Her parents, Leonard and Beatrix, are the type of individuals who enjoy being the focus of attention. They are loud, opinionated, and always have something to say about everything. At first I assumed it was just their personality, but as time passed, I noticed how their entitlement permeated everything they did. Before we get into what happened, let me talk about my mother. Patricia was the best person I ever knew. She died 2 years ago following a 3-year battle with cancer. It was humbling to watch her fight that cancer, while yet finding ways to prioritize others. She taught me so much about kindness, giving, and advocating for what is right. My mother was more than simply my rock, she was a lifeline for many people. She had a way of stepping in and assisting others without making them feel embarrassed or obliged, as if she would simply do what was to be done. This includes Fidelia's family. Leonard and Beatrix owe her a lot, but the way they talk about her now doesn't reflect that. When I first presented Fidelia to my mother, things went smoothly. My mother liked Fidelia, she told me so, and Fidelia appeared pleasant. However, when things became more severe, it became clear that Fidelia did not get along well with my mother. It wasn't anything major, just a few comments here and there. Fidelia, for example, would refer to my mother as overly interested or eager to help. It irritated me, but I chalked it up to anxiety, or Fidelia's adjustment to being a new family member. The fact is, my mother did a lot for Fidelia's family. Years ago, when their restaurant was about to close, my mother co-signed a loan to assist them out. Nobody else would take that chance, but my mother trusted in them. She even assisted them in organizing their finances and developing a strategy to re-establish profitability in the business. And it worked. The restaurant survived, and Leonard and Beatrix were able to maintain their livelihood. But it did not end there. When their restaurant's industrial oven broke down, and they didn't have the money to replace it, my mother paid for it outright so they wouldn't lose business. She never asked for the money back, despite the fact that she might have used it later to pay her own medical needs. That's simply who she was. Then there was Fidelia's elder brother, Ryan. He was struggling to complete college since he couldn't afford the tuition for his final semester. My mother stepped in and covered the expense so he didn't have to drop out. She went on. Education is one thing no one can take away from you. She provided not just money, but also time and energy. She spent hours assisting Fidelia's family with everything from bookkeeping tips to babysitting Ryan's children so he could concentrate on his studies. And let me tell you something. Leonard, Beatrix, and Ryan never thanked her properly. Sure, they muttered thank you in passing, but there was no genuine recognition of what she had done for them. However, my mother was unconcerned about this. She wasn't looking for recognition. She only wants to help people. My mother passed suddenly, and I was crushed. She was my universe, and losing her felt like a piece of me had vanished forever. Fidelia was there for me at the worst of it, or so I thought. Looking back, I realized that most of her assistance was focused on doing the absolute minimum. She'd say things like, "You need to move on," or, "Your mom wouldn't want you to be stuck in grief." That may have been accurate, but it did not provide comfort. It seemed contemptuous. Leading up to the wedding, I began to see more red flags. Fidelia was strangely disdainful whenever I mentioned my mother in chats about the ceremony. For example, I wanted to include a brief tribute to my mother before the vows, but Fidelia dismissed it, saying, "Isn't that going to make people sad? Weddings are supposed to be happy." I let it go since I did not want to start a quarrel. But small things like this kept stacking up. Then Leonard and Beatrix made their comments. They talked down to me, as if Fidelia's marriage was beneath her. Leonard once made a joke about Fidelia improving her life by marrying someone from a lower socioeconomic status. Beatrix would say things like, "Well, we all make sacrifices for love," as if Fidelia was helping me by agreeing to marry me. It stung, but I kept my mouth shut for Fidelia. Looking back, I wish I had spoken up earlier. Perhaps I could have spared myself some misery. But I kept telling myself that after the wedding was over and the dust had settled, things will improve. I could not have been more wrong. Fast forward roughly a month before the wedding. That's when things began to unravel. As I previously stated, Fidelia's parents, Leonard and Beatrix, offered to host the rehearsal dinner at a prestigious restaurant to which they had relations. At first, I assumed it was a wonderful gesture. I assumed they were trying to smooth over all of the snarky remarks and unpleasant moments we'd had while preparing the wedding. I even convinced myself that this could be their way of stepping up and demonstrating some class. Now, some context for this dinner. Fidelia's parents did not just offer to host it. They made a huge show of their generosity. Beatrix kept bringing it up in conversations like, "Oh, we've put so much effort into making this rehearsal dinner perfect. It's going to be the talk of the town." Leonard, of course, chimed in every chance he got, reminding me and everyone else that the restaurant was one of the best in the area, and that we were lucky they were able to secure it. The entire experience began to feel less like a gift, and more like an ego boost for them. But whatever. I was focused on making the wedding happen, so I let them handle the rehearsal dinner. A big mistake. As the occasion approached, Leonard and Beatrix's real colors became increasingly apparent. Every chat with them turned into a backhanded or passive-aggressive remark. When I tried to confirm the guest list for the dinner, Beatrix rolled her eyes and said, "We'll handle it, Michael. You don't need to stress over the details, just show up and enjoy." It was a minor thing, but it bothered me. So, this was supposed to be our event, correct? Shouldn't Fidelia and I have a say over who comes? Then there was the menu. Beatrix made a big fuss about how they were planning a high-end dining experience for the evening. She continued to say things like, "Oh, we've got the chef to create something really special. Nothing like what you'd normally find back home, Michael." That final part was her favorite dig. Back home. She enjoyed reminding me that I wasn't in the same social circle as them. I come from a small working-class community, and they never let me forget it. I tried to brush it off and concentrate on the big picture. I kept reminding myself, it's just one night. Smile, nod, and get through it. But even Fidelia began to act strangely. She'd always had the habit of side with her parents on issues, but it worsened in the weeks leading up to the dinner. Anytime I mentioned an idea or a concern, she'd dismiss it and say, "Michael, you're overthinking this. My parents know what they're doing." However, it wasn't just about the food. It was the way they treated me like an outsider in my own relationship. They treated me as if I was lucky just to be in the room. Like I should be grateful that Fidelia agreed to marry me. And Fidelia? She never stood up for me. If anything, she encouraged it by laughing along and disregarding my attempts to bring it up. A week before the dinner, there was an incident that should have raised a red signal for me. Fidelia and I were at her parents' house negotiating wedding plans. Beatrix was in full charge, scrolling through seating plans and floral arrangements as if she were organizing a royal event. At one point, I suggested altering the centerpieces to something simpler. Something my mother would have enjoyed. Beatrix did not even look up from her binder. It was all she said. "Oh, Patricia had interesting taste, didn't she? But this is Fidelia's day. Let's keep things modern, shall we?" I froze. It was a slight jab, but it struck me hard. Fidelia did not say anything. She merely continued looking through her phone as if nothing had happened. I wanted to confront Beatrix right then and there, but I didn't want to cause a quarrel, so I swallowed my pride and remained quiet. Looking back, I regret that I did not say anything. It felt as if every insult and slight was stacking up, but I continued ignoring it, because I didn't want to rock the boat. I thought I was maintaining the peace. The rehearsal dinner date had finally arrived, and I could feel the anxiety in the air. Fidelia and I drove to the restaurant together, and I tried to make small chat to lighten the atmosphere. She remained quiet, browsing through her phone and barely reacting. When I inquired if she was excited, she merely shrugged and replied, "It's just a dinner, Michael. Don't stress. Just dinner, right?" When we arrived at the restaurant, Leonard and Beatrix were already there, acting like they owned the place. Leonard was standing by the entryway, greeting visitors as they entered, while Beatrix was busy instructing the workers. It felt more like a corporate occasion than a family gathering. The restaurant itself was extravagantly decorated, with white tables, chandeliers and the works. It was the type of location that screamed, Look how important we are. And to be honest, it only made me feel more uncomfortable. As the guests poured in, I saw something strange. The majority of those present were from Fidelia's side of the family. My family consisted of 3 or 4 members. My father, my sister, and a few close friends and relatives. Everyone else was Fidelia's relative, or one of her parents' business associates. It seemed as if they had transformed the rehearsal supper into a networking opportunity. I drew Fidelia aside and inquired what was going on. "Why aren't more of my family here?" I asked. She gave me a frustrated look and said, "Michael, your family is small. My parents had to fill the room somehow. It's not a big deal." Not a huge deal. That was her solution to everything. I bit my tongue and resumed conversing. But I couldn't get the impression that this evening wasn't about us. It was about Leonard and Beatrix bragging. They had taken what was supposed to be a celebration of our partnership and turned it into their own circus. After everyone had eaten, the real show began. Speeches. Of course, Leonard was the first to get up. He took the microphone as if he were delivering a major lecture at a conference, not discussing his daughter's wedding. He cleared his throat and began, "Welcome, everyone. Tonight is about celebrating the union of 2 families, our Fidelia, and of course, Michael." He spoke my name as if it left a foul taste in his mouth. I sat there trying to remain calm, but every word he said was a poorly veiled attack. He began talking about how proud he was of Fidelia, how she had always been the star of the family, and how she had always understood what she wanted in life and pursued it. And now she's marrying someone who will help her stay grounded. He smirked as he said it, and I swear a few people laughed. I just gazed at him, wondering if I had heard him correctly. Then he began telling a story about Fidelia, who was always a high achiever, even as a child, and how fortunate she was to have their leadership to keep her on course. At one point he stated, "You know, we've always taught Fidelia to aim high. And while Michael might not be what we envisioned at first." He trailed off, leaving the phrase hanging as if it was meant to be hilarious. I could feel my father and sister gazing at him from across the table. Beatrix was next up. She strutted to the microphone, as if she were about to accept an award. Her speech started very well. She mentioned how much she adored Fidelia, and how excited she was for the wedding. But then she started making tiny digs at me. She commented of Fidelia being the perfect kid who deserved the best in life, saying, "It's a good thing she's patient, because she's taught Michael so much already." I nearly choked on my water. What did Fidelia teach me? How could I hold my tongue while her folks insulted me every chance they got? Then Beatrix looked at me and said, "Oh, we're so happy to welcome you into the family, Michael. It'll be nice to finally have someone who doesn't mind getting their hands dirty, right?" She laughed, and a few of her relatives joined in. I looked at Fidelia, thinking she'd intervene or at least appear uncomfortable, but she was smiling along with them. And just as I thought things couldn't get much worse, Leonard returned to the microphone. He raised his beverage to his lips. "One last thing before we wrap this up. I just want to acknowledge someone who's no longer with us, but played a big role in shaping who Michael is. His mom, Patricia." For a single second I thought he may say something kind. But no. Instead he responded, "Patricia was one of a kind. She had a habit of inserting herself into situations, didn't she? Always had an opinion about how things should be done." He giggled, and Beatrix responded, "Oh, she definitely had strong opinions. Remember how she always insisted on helping us even when we didn't ask?" I couldn't believe what I heard. They were talking about my mother, as if she were a nosy neighbor. Leonard was not done. "But in all seriousness," he said, "Patricia was a generous woman. She helped us out a lot. Sometimes too much, if I'm being honest." He winked, as if it was an inside joke. The room became quiet, but Leonard kept going. "We'll be sure to keep her spirit alive at the wedding. Let's hope Michael doesn't inherit her enthusiasm for taking charge, though. We wouldn't want him meddling too much, right?" That was it. My face became hot, and I tightened my hands beneath the table. I looked to Fidelia, hoping for her to say anything, to stop them. But she just laughed and said, "Oh, Dad, stop," as if everything was harmless fun. Is this harmless fun? They were mocking my mother's memories in front of a large audience, and Fidelia thought it was funny? I could not believe it. The worst part was Leonard and Beatrix pretended to be lovely. They had a smug expression on their cheeks, as if they assumed everyone was laughing with them. But as I looked around the room, I realized that wasn't the case. When Leonard eventually sat down, the tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. The clinking of forks and glasses resumed as people clumsily attempted to move on from the train wreck of a speech. Fidelia leaned over and murmured, "Are you okay?" Her tone was nonchalant, as if she were asking if I wanted more water, not whether I was enraged. I did not even look at her. I only nodded. My mouth tightened so hard I felt my teeth would fracture. But then Beatrix came up to our table. "Michael," she added softly, "I hope you weren't offended. Leonard and I just wanted to add a little humor to the evening. It's all in good fun." That's when something inside me snapped. I could not keep quiet any longer. I rose up, my chair grinding loudly on the floor. "Are you serious right now?" I asked, my voice low and trembling with wrath. So there I was, standing in the middle of the rehearsal dinner, my chair still slightly tipped back from when I got up. The entire room had gone dead silent, like if someone had muted the television. All eyes were on me, but I didn't mind. My heart was hammering and my face was flushed, but I knew I couldn't just ignore this. Leonard and Beatrix's ridiculing of my mother was already too much, but Beatrix's faux apologies was the final straw. "Are you serious right now?" I asked, gazing straight at Beatrix. She hesitated for a second, perhaps not expecting me to call her out. Leonard looked up from his glass, as if I'd insulted him. Fidelia, seated next to me, said, "Michael, stop." I ignored her. "Let me get this straight," I shouted, my voice becoming louder. "You spent the entire night taking cheap shots at my mom, the woman who helped your family when no one else would, and now you're acting like it was just a joke? You think that's okay?" Leonard reclined back in his chair and folded his arms. "Relax, Michael," he added, smirking as if this wasn't a big problem. "You're overreacting. It was all in good fun." "Good fun?" I replied. "You called her meddling. You said she was too much. You mocked her generosity like it was some kind of flaw. How was that good fun?" The tension in the room was intolerable. I noticed a number of Fidelia's cousins gazing down at their plates, apparently uncomfortable. My father, on the other hand, looked at Leonard as if he wanted to punch him. My sister crossed her arms and glared at Beatrix, as if she was waiting for her turn to join in. Beatrix attempted to laugh it off. "Oh, Michael, don't be so sensitive. We were just sharing a few stories. Everyone knows how Patricia liked to take charge." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Take charge?" I asked, my voice rising. "She helped you. She saved your business when you were about to lose it. She paid for your oven repairs, your patio remodel, and your son's college tuition. And this is how you repay her? By turning her into some kind of joke at a rehearsal dinner?" Leonard sat up straighter, visibly annoyed now. "All right, that's enough," he responded, attempting to appear authoritative. "We didn't mean any harm, but if you're going to throw a tantrum about it, maybe you're not ready for marriage." That comment demonstrated how little he respected me, or my mother for that matter. Fidelia eventually spoke up and tugged on my sleeve. "Michael, can we just go outside and talk, please?" I moved my arm away. "No, Fidelia, we can't. Not until your parents understand how disrespectful they've been." Beatrix sighed heavily, as if she were the victim in all of this. "Michael, this is supposed to be a happy occasion. You're ruining the evening for everyone." "I'm ruining the evening?" I exclaimed, my voice quivering with rage. "No, Beatrix. You ruined it the second you decided to trash my mom in front of everyone. And Fidelia, you just sat there and let it happen." Fidelia's face flushed red. "I didn't know they were going to say all that," she said defensively. "But you laughed," I said back. "You laughed at every single insult. You didn't even try to stop them." At this point, the whispers in the room became more audible. People were leaning over to each other, muttering about the events unfolding in front of them. I felt the weight of their glances, but I didn't mind. This was not about them. This was about standing up for my mother. Leonard stood up, evidently frustrated. "All right, Michael. If you're so offended, maybe you should leave," he remarked, gesturing to the door. For a time I contemplated it. I considered just walking away, leaving them to their wonderful little dinner. But then I looked around the room, at my father, my sister, and the few friends who had come to support me. They were all watching, waiting to see what I was going to do, and I realized that I was not going to allow Leonard and Beatrix get away with it. Not this time. No, I replied firmly. I'm not leaving. Not until you understand what you've done. Leonard opened his lips to answer, but I interrupted him. You act like my mom was some overbearing busybody. But without her, you wouldn't even have this restaurant connection. She didn't do any of that because she wanted recognition or praise. She did it because she cared. And now you're sitting here trashing her memory like it's some kind of punchline? That's not just disrespectful, it's disgusting. The room became utterly silent again. Even Leonard appeared taken aback as if he didn't know how to respond. Beatrix opened her mouth, but no words emerged. Fidelia merely sat there, staring at the table, her expression a mix of humiliation and rage. Leonard finally murmured, "We didn't mean it like that." "It doesn't matter how you meant it, I told you. What matters is how it came across. You don't get to rewrite who my mom was just because it suits your narrative. She deserved better than that. And honestly, so do I." With that, I stepped away from the table and grabbed my coat. "You want me to leave? Fine. But don't expect me to come back." My father sprang up instantly, preparing to follow me out. My sister grabbed her purse and gave Beatrix one last scowl before joining us. A handful of my buddies also stood up, looking apprehensive but supportive. Fidelia yelled after me, "Michael, wait!" But I didn't stop. I walked out of the restaurant with my head held high, despite the fact that my heart was hammering. Outside, my father placed a hand on my shoulder. "You did the right thing," he replied. "Your mom would be proud." I nodded but didn't feel proud. I felt angry and betrayed. And I realized something. If she couldn't stand up for me or my mother, perhaps she wasn't who I thought she was. Part of me thought I had done the right thing by stepping away. But a part of me couldn't get over the notion that it wasn't enough. If I kept things as they were, Fidelia and her family would just spin the tale to make me the bad person. They'd interpret it as my being overly sensitive or overreacting. I could not let that happen. This wasn't only about me. It was about my mother's memory and what I stood for. I took a deep breath and turned to face my father. "I need to go back in there," I said. "What?" my sister cried out. "Why? You don't owe them anything." "I know," I replied, glancing at her. "But I'm not leaving this unfinished. I need to make it clear, to Fidelia, to her parents, to everyone, that I'm done. For good." My father hesitated, then nodded. "If that's what you need to do, we'll back you up." "No," I replied, shaking my head. "This is something I have to do on my own." My sister appeared to want to argue, but she remained silent. I turned and headed back to the restaurant. My gut was knotted, but my head was clear. I was not going back in there to start a scene. I was walking back in to put an end to things once and for all. People were speaking to one another and stealing looks toward the door as I stepped back inside. Fidelia remained sitting at the table, her face pallid and her eyes wide. When she spotted me, she got up. "Michael," she answered. "What are you doing?" I ignored her inquiry and proceeded to the front of the room, where Leonard and Beatrix still sat, looking way too pleased with themselves. Leonard arched an eyebrow as I arrived, obviously not expecting me to return. Beatrix gave me the same fake lovely smile she had been wearing all night. "Back so soon?" Leonard inquired, his tone tinged with disdain. I did not bother responding to him. Instead, I turned and faced the entire room. "Excuse me, everyone," I yelled loudly enough for the entire room to hear. The whispering ceased immediately, and all eyes returned to me. My heart was pumping, but I maintained a calm voice. "I have something I need to say." I looked at Fidelia, who was standing transfixed beside the table, her hands clutched tightly in front of her. "I know this isn't the time or place anyone expected for this, but after what's happened tonight, I don't see any reason to wait." I took a deep breath and proceeded. "This wedding is off." The room erupted with gasps, murmurs and chair scrapings as individuals turned to face each other. Fidelia's jaw dropped and her hands sprang to her mouth. "No, Michael," she muttered. But I raised a hand to stop her. The room was completely silent now. Even the waitstaff had stopped moving and stood frozen in the corners of the room. I returned my attention to the remaining guests. "This isn't just about tonight," I corrected myself. This is about the kind of family I'd be marrying into. A family that doesn't respect me, doesn't respect my mom, and doesn't respect the values I was raised with. I can't, and I won't, spend the rest of my life being treated like this. Leonard finally discovered his voice. You're making a big mistake, kid, he replied, with a condescending tone. You're throwing away a good thing over nothing. I laughed bitterly. Nothing. You think disrespecting my mom is nothing? You think treating me like I'm less than is nothing? No, Leonard. The mistake would be going through with this wedding and tying myself to a family that doesn't deserve me. Beatrix appeared to be poised to cry. Or perhaps she was simply humiliated that their little spectacle had failed. Michael, she began with a trembling voice. Let's not make decisions in the heat of the moment. We can talk about this tomorrow when everyone's had a chance to cool down. No, I replied firmly. We're not talking about this tomorrow or ever. This is done. I turned to Fidelia one last time. Her face was smeared with tears, and she looked like she couldn't decide whether to shout or beg. I returned to the door, my footsteps echoing in the silent room. As I grabbed for the handle, Fidelia called after me one more time. Michael, please don't do this. I paused for a second, my hand on the door, before turning around and saying, I already did. Walking out of that restaurant felt like pulling off a bandage. There was a sting, indeed. But the predominant sensation was relief. It was over. The wedding, the ongoing disrespect, the sense of being second best in a family I was supposed to join. It was all behind me. The major consequences began the following morning. I awoke to approximately 100 unread texts on my phone. Most of them came from Fidelia. A handful were from Leonard and Beatrix, and a couple were from odd cousins of hers that I hardly knew. The texts varied from appealing to outright rude. Fidelia's texts were filled with apologies. I'm sorry, Michael. I didn't mean to hurt you. Please just talk to me. Leonard's were more aggressive. You embarrassed us in front of everyone. You'll regret this. And Beatrix? She attempted to play the victim. I can't believe you'd do this to Fidelia. She didn't deserve this. I disregarded them all. Fidelia arrived at my apartment around mid-afternoon. I knew what was coming. I'd been preparing for it all day, but it didn't make things any easier. When I opened the door, she appeared to have not slept. Her eyes were red, and her face was splotchy from sobbing. She was still wearing the same clothing from the night before, as if she had gone straight home and wept herself to sleep. Michael, she asked gently, her voice cracking. Can we please talk? I crossed my arms and leaned against the doorframe. What's there to talk about, Fidelia? I made myself pretty clear last night. She flinched as if I had hit her, but she refused to back down. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be, she replied. But we can fix this. We can work through it. I shake my head. You don't get it, do you? This isn't something we can just work through. She wiped her eyes with the back of her fingers, her voice trembling as she said, I was scared, okay? I didn't know what to do. Scared of what? I inquired, my rage pouring up. Scared of upsetting your parents? Scared of making a scene? She did not have a response. She just stood there crying, and I gazed at her, waiting for something, anything, that would convince me she knew what she'd done. But nothing arrived. Her eyes widened as she took a step forward. Please, Michael, she whispered. Don't do this. We can make it work. I'll talk to my parents. I'll make them apologize. Just don't end it like this. I shook my head again. It's not just about your parents, Fidelia. It's about you. Last night showed me exactly who you are, and I can't unsee it. I deserve better than this. She looked at me for a time, her face falling as realization set in. One Saturday afternoon, I was cleaning out my mother's old treasure box. It was something I'd held onto since Mom died. Inside were her favorite necklace, a pair of earrings she used to wear to church, and a small delicate locket containing a photograph of my grandmother. That necklace had been in my family for centuries, passed down from mother to daughter. And my mother had given it to me before she died. She said, one day, you'll know the right person to give this to. I had stored it safely in the box ever since. It wasn't simply a piece of jewelry. It was a piece of her, and our family history. However, when I opened the box that day, the locket was gone. At first, I felt I was imagining things. I ripped the box apart, carefully checking every crevice, but it was not there. I examined the drawers where I kept the box, the shelves, and even the floor surrounding it. Nothing. My heart fell when I realized that someone had grabbed it. Fidelia was the only individual who had recently visited my place, aside from my family and close friends. My gut churned as I put it together. She'd came over a few days after the breakup to deliver the engagement ring. I didn't think much of it when she wanted to use the restroom before leaving, but now, everything made sense. I grabbed my phone and texted her, "Did you take the locket from my mom's keepsake box?" She responded a few minutes later, "What are you talking about?" I didn't believe it for a second. "You know exactly what I'm talking about. The locket my mom left me. It's gone. You're the only person who's been in my apartment recently. Did you take it?" She did not react immediately, but when she did, her message made my blood boil. "I borrowed it because I wanted to keep a piece of her with me. I thought it would help me feel closer to you." Borrowed. She took it without asking, without even informing me. I couldn't believe their arrogance. I called her immediately. When she answered, she sounded defensive, as if she were the victim in all of this. "Michael, it's not a big deal," she explained. "I was going to give it back." "Not a big deal," I snapped. "That locket has been in my family for generations. It's not some trinket you can just take because you feel like it. How could you even think that was okay?" "I just wanted to feel connected to you," she explained, her voice shaking as if she were trying to play the compassion card. "I didn't think you'd notice." "Of course I'd notice," I exclaimed. "It's my mom's. And the fact that you didn't think to ask me first makes it even worse." She started crying at that time, but I was not in the mood to console her. "Where is it?" I demanded. "It's at my parents' house," she admitted, sobbing. "I didn't want to lose it, so I left it there for safekeeping. That was the final straw." "You took something that didn't belong to you, something that means more to me than you'll ever understand. And you just left it at your parents' house? Are you kidding me?" "I'm sorry," she muttered. "Sorry doesn't cut it," I replied, my voice frigid. "I'm coming to get it now." An hour later, I pulled up to Leonard and Beatrix's home. My rage had risen during the drive, and by the time I knocked on the door, I was about to burst. Beatrix opened it, her fake nice grin evaporating as she noticed the expression on my face. "Michael," she replied cautiously. "What are you doing here?" "I'm here to get my mom's locket," I stated plainly. "Fidelia told me it's here." Beatrix's expression wavered between confusion and annoyance. "Fidelia took a locket? Why would she?" "Just get it," I interjected. She narrowed her eyes and stepped aside to allow me to enter. Fidelia returned downstairs a few minutes later, holding the locket. Her eyes were red, and her face was blotchy, but I didn't mind. I only noticed the locket dangling from her fingers, as if it were nothing. "Here," she said, holding it out for me. I grabbed it from her hand, and examined it, to ensure it was the same one. When I was finished, I tucked it into my pocket and turned to leave. "Oh Michael, wait," she exclaimed, her voice urgent. "I didn't mean to upset you. I was just trying to save it." "Save it?" I asked, cutting her short. "Fidelia, you stole from me. From my mom. Like what you'd already done wasn't enough." Her face crumpled, and she began to cry again, but I could not stop. I walked out, and slammed the door behind me. In the days that followed, I banned her phone number, deleted her texts, and eliminated every possible opportunity for her to contact me. I was done with her, her family, and the drama they had brought into my life. Calling off the wedding had been difficult, but this was the final nail in the coffin. And, as exhausting as it was, it also seemed like a resolution. I stood up for myself, my mother, and the principles she taught in me. I knew I had made the proper decision, and for the first time in a long time, I felt calm.